Hello, it's Friday, read along Friday. Kelly, is that you? The only person who ever used to get a thumbs up before appearing was you. So I love when you're here. A Tale of Two Cities. It's Friday and it's been a week. A lot of stress at work, education. You can imagine back to school and all the controversy. I started a mind-body class last night. So Dinah, yay. You're so close to 13,000 and the end of the book. You're right. But this chapter, chapter 9, which is called I can't read it at all. My eyes are so tired. The Game Made. The Game Made. Interesting. It's a long one. So I need to not chit-chat too much. But I was saying I took a mind-body class for the first time. It's a 6-week course that I'm going to take. Did it last night. So we meditate, and then we do a coloring activity. So there's a question, there's a prompt, and it's not an art class, obviously. There's a prompt, and you're supposed to answer the prompt through your illustration. It was really an interesting experience. And then another meditation. So learning how to deal with the stress. So if you guys are really back to school and the pandemic has you crazy and the pressure, like your senior year, and you've got a lot of disappointment, or your freshman year, you've got a lot of nervousness, and it's not the year you expected it to be. You know, there is good mental health that you can reach out for. And guys, just like here, there's YouTube for tutorials on makeup and tutorials on fixing anything in your house and tutorials on how to read a book. There are tutorials on how to do mind-body work, like meditation and guided meditation and prayer and, whatever is close to you spiritually that works. I just encourage you to be present and encourage you to take that deep cleansing breath and let go of that stress and tell yourself it's going to be okay. I read a thing about anxiety that says, there's a part of you that says, what are you scared of? You think this is a big, scary word, big, scary world, silly you. And then you come to find out it is a big, silly word. It is a big, silly world. It is a big, scary world, but you're brave. So I'm just encouraging you guys to be brave and take that breath and find somebody to talk to about your feelings and, move, walk, swim, whatever it is that helps you deal with all the pressure. And, just do your best to get through each day. And that is Suhani. Hello. So it's a long chapter, The Game Made, and we are into the thick of things. We've got this big reveal that Miss Pross's brother was actually that spy John Barsad. And he has been taken by Sidney Carton, who has shown up in Paris, and he's been taken back to cook up some plan that Sidney Carton has. And so we're on chapter 9, book 3, The Game Made. Let's read. While Sidney Carton and the sheep of the prisons were in the adjoining dark room, speaking so low that not a sound was heard, Mr. Lorry looked at Jerry in considerable doubt and mistrust. That honest tradesman manner of receiving the look did not inspire confidence. He changed the leg on which he rested as often as if he had 50 of those limbs and were trying them all. He examined his fingernails with a very questionable closeness of attention, and whenever Mr. Lorry's eye caught his, he was taken with that peculiar sort of cough requiring the hollow of a hand before it, which is seldom, if ever, known to be an infirmity attendant on perfect openness of character. I don't know about you, but I didn't really quite get what any of that meant. And in teaching you about reading comprehension, unless you just really want to sit and break it down and say, what did he say? I would say I don't think it was that important. It was just Dickens enjoying showing off and flexing, how what a good writer he is, and really trying to create a picture in your mind. If it didn't create the picture and it doesn't seem to be substantively important, just move on. Jerry, said Mr. Lorry, come here. Mr. Cruncher came forward sideways with one of his shoulders in advance of him. What have you been besides a messenger? Like, what kind of work? After some cogitation, thinking, accompanied with an intent look at his patron, Mr. Cruncher conceived the luminous idea of replying, agricultural character. My mind misgives me much, said Mr. Lorry, angrily shaking his forefinger at him, that you have used the respectable and great house of Tellson's as a blind, and that you have had an unlawful occupation of an infamous description. If you have, don't expect me to befriend you when you get back to England. If you have, don't expect me to keep your secret. Tellson shall not be opposed on. So we know that he was a grave robber, a grave digger, and we have that revealed because he knew that John Barsad had faked the death of his friend, and we know that because Jerry Cruncher knew there was no body in the casket. Why would you know that unless you had opened the casket to be a grave robber? And so now Tellson, Mr. Lorry, who is, this man above reproach, he follows all the rules. He says, when we get back to England, you're in big trouble. You know how your mom's like, just wait until your father gets home. Or your mom's like, we will talk about, like you're at the party and you're doing something you're not supposed to. And your mom's like, we will talk about this when we get home. Just get in the car. And there's no talking the whole time. It's that waiting, right? And Priam, what did you get? Got it. I don't know what you got. I probably said something and I've already forgotten what you got. I hope, sir, pleaded the abashed Mr. Cruncher, that a gentleman like yourself, what I've had the honor of odd jobbing till I'm gray at, would think twice about harming of me, even if it was so. I don't say it is, but even if it was, and which it is to be took into account that if it was, it wouldn't even then be all one side. There'd be two sides to it. There might be medical doctors at the present hour a picking up their guineas where an honest tradesman don't pick up his fardens. Fardens, no, nor yet his half fardens. Half fardens, no, nor yet his quarter, a banking away like smoke at Tellson's and a cockering their medical eyes at the tradesmen on the sly, a going in and a going out to their own carriages, equally like smoke, if not more so. Well, that'd be imposing too on Tellson's, for you cannot sarce a goose and not the gander. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. He's saying, look, there might be a reason. I'm not saying I was a grave robber, but Hay said, but I'm saying if I was a grave robber, maybe there was a reason, maybe for medical research, maybe if doctors are doing it, good for the goose, good for the gander. If they can do it and not be considered bad, why can't I do it and it be the same? Don't judge me. Don't judge me. So he's all worked up. My nose always itches when I read, and I don't know why that is. And here's Mrs. Cruncher, at least was in the old England times, and would be tomorrow because given a flopping means praying. Again, the business to that degree as in ruinating, stark ruinating, whereas the medical doctors' wives don't flop, catch them at it. Or if they flop, their floppings goes in favor of more patients, or how can you rightly have one without the other? Then what with undertakers, what with parish clerks, what with sextons, and what with, like, he's naming all of them, and what with private watchmen, all, I don't know this word, avaricious. He always has this weird accent, and as I don't know the British accent, avaricious, maybe avaricious, like all out to get me, to have ill intent, and all in that. A man wouldn't get much by it, even if it was so. And what little a man did get would never prosper in Mr. Lorry. He'd never have no good of it. He'd want all along to be out of the line if he could see his way out, being once in, even if it was what so. Maniba, it's been a while. Ugh, cried Mr. Lorry, rather relenting nevertheless. I'm shocked at the sight of you. Now, what I would humbly offer to you, sir, pursued Mr. Cruncher, even if it was so, which I don't say it is, don't prevaricate, don't lie, said Mr. Lorry. No, I will not, sir, returned Mr. Cruncher, as if nothing were further from his thought or practice, which I don't say it is. What I would humbly offer to you, sir, would be this. Upon that there stool, at that there bar, sits that there boy of mine, brought up and growed up to be a man. What will errand you, message you, general light job you, till your heels is where your head is, if such should be your wishes. If it was so, which I still don't say it is, for I will not prevaricate to you, sir. Let that there boy keep his father's place and take care of his mother. Don't blow up that boy's father. Do not do it, sir. And let that father go into the line of the regular digging and make amends for what he would have undug if it was so, by digging of him in. The accent is really hard. Quick question. Will you be able to read Sleeping Death by Agatha Christie? So, honey, probably not in the timeline you would need it, because I am reading, look, I have it right here. I am reading 1984 when I finished this, and we still have this much more to go. We've read this much. We have this much more to go. So I figure it's going to be a couple more weeks before we finish this book. And then 1984 is fairly thick. I don't know how many chapters it is. It doesn't have chapter numbers, but it's 320 plus pages. So sadly, I probably won't get to that one, because there's a list I have in my mind. I'm in Louisiana, and Louisiana has a recommended reading list, and I'm trying to get the books from that in there. So I'm sorry to disappoint you. Thank you for asking. Thank you for understanding. That's why we need more readers, so that other people can be helping with this. Muniba, I'm well. Thank you. I just always have, I don't know, allergies, but maybe because the ceiling fan's going. Whenever I sit here to read, my nose tickles, and I tickle it. I itch at it. I don't even know what you call that. And this character, Mr. Jerry Cruncher, his accent, his dialect is really hard for me to read. So bear with me. Thank you. That Mr. Lorry, said Mr. Cruncher, wiping his forehead with his arm as an announcement that he had arrived at the peroration of his discourse, is what I would respectfully offer to you, sir. A man don't see all this here going on dreadful around him in the way of subjects without head, dear me. Now, this is an interesting writing technique of Dickens. He brought the story up like I was really engaged. You know, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, they've taken John Barsad off, and there's some secret, and we know that Charles Darnay has been arrested again. Like the energy, the tension was building, and now we're off on this silly dialogue between Jerry Cruncher and Mr. Lorry about Jerry Cruncher's morality. And really, at the end of a week on Friday, I'm like, I'm not pulled in by this conversation, like this dialogue between the two of them. So I may skip some. And I'm skipping 2 paragraphs. They just agreed to disagree. Mr. Cruncher knuckled his forehead as Cindy Carton and the spy returned from the dark. Adieu, Mr. Barsad, said the former. Our arrangement thus made, you have nothing to fear from me. He sat down in a chair on the hearth, over against Mr. Lorry. When they were alone, Mr. Lorry asked him what he had done. Not much. If it should go ill with the prisoner, I have ensured access to him once. Mr. Lorry's countenance fell. It is all I could do, said Carton. To propose too much would be to put this man's head under the axe. And he himself said nothing worse could happen to him if he were denounced. It was obviously the weakness of the position. There is no help for it. But access to him, said Mr. Lorry, if it should go ill before the tribunal, will not save him. I never said it would. Mr. Lorry's eyes gradually sought the fire. His sympathy with his darling and the heavy disappointment of his second arrest gradually weakened them. He was an old man now, Mr. Lorry, overborne with anxiety of late, and his tears fell. So he's thinking, oh my gosh, they've rearrested Charles Darnay. There's no way to, it's not looking hopeful to get him out. And he loves Lucy, and he knows how heartbroken Lucy's going to be. And he's just tired and frustrated, and he begins to cry. So we see this humanity in Mr. Lorry. Hey, Kelly, I thought you were on earlier. Muniba, it is. It's a tough accent to grasp. You are a good and true friend, said Carton in an altered voice. Forgive me if I notice that you are affected. I think men, in my stereotypical understanding of British men, stiff upper lip and everything. He's like, I see that you're crying and I'm going to call attention to it instead of just looking the other way. I could not see my father weep and sit by careless, and I could not respect your sorrow more if you were my father. You are free from that misfortune, however. Though he said the last words with a slip into his usual manner, there was a true feeling of respect both in his tone and in his touch that Mr. Lorry, who had never seen the better side of him, remember he's kind of a jerk, this Sidney Carton, and he already told Lucy that, I love you. I love you like I've never loved anybody, but even that love doesn't change my nature. I'm a scoundrel. I'm a drunken, selfish scoundrel. And so Laurie is saying, oh, for the first time I see that, that you're a good guy. So we're going to begin to see a lot of change in Sidney Carton. And Rivers White says, thanks for the Scarlet Letter. There's a shout out to y'all that don't know what else is on my playlist. Scarlet Letter. Needed. I'm glad it was helpful. It doesn't seem like to be very much read on my analytics, but I know schools still read the Scarlet Letter. And I like Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Minister's Black Veil short story. And I'm not sure if that short story is on my playlist or not, but I used to teach it. So, though he said I read that. He gave him his hand, and Carton gently pressed it. To return to poor Darnay, said Carton, don't tell her of this interview or this arrangement. It would not enable her to go see him. She might think it was contrived, in case of the worst, to convey to him the means of anticipating the sentence. He's like, don't tell Lucy that I've made this agreement that I can get in to see Darnay if it goes badly, because one, she might think it means it's going to go badly, and two, she might think there's some other, like, what was the other thing you said? She might think it was contrived in the worst case to convey to him the means of anticipating the sentence. Yeah. So I just don't want to make it worse for her. Mr. Lorry had not thought of that, and he looked quickly at Carton to see if it were in his mind. It seemed to be. He returned the look and evidently understood it. She might think 1,000 things, Carton said, and any of them would only add to her trouble. Don't speak of me to her. As I said to you when I first came, I had better not see her. I can put my hand out to do any little helpful work for her that my hand can find to do without that. You are going to her, I hope. She must be very desolate tonight. I'm going now, directly. I'm glad of that. She has such a strong attachment to you and reliance on you. How does she look? Anxious and unhappy, but very beautiful. There's that romantic ideal of the heroine. She's in distress, the damsel in distress. She's in distress. She's haggard looking, she's tired, and yet she's beautiful. There's that romantic ideal that has forced all women for all generations to have to live up to this expectation of looking perfect no matter what you're going through. We don't sweat. There's a whole new series of of ads and stuff about the odors of women, the normal bodily functions of women. And for my generation, that's just shocking, because I've been brought up with this kind of image of women, that females always smell like roses. They never sweat. They glisten. They're beautiful no matter how tired they are, how hungry they are. That there's just this sense of romantic beauty there. Kelly, that's what the commercial's about. These women are coming up and saying, I pooed today. I look great because I just had a good poo. It's like, I'm shocked by this idea of portraying women this way, because I bought into romantic literature all my life. And it's this sense of perfection and romanticism. And so, Kelly, this is why I love you. Thank you for being here. Okay, where are we? But very beautiful. It was a long, grieving sound, like a sigh, almost like a sob. It attracted Mr. Lorry's eyes to Carton's face, which was turned to the fire. A light or a shade, the old gentleman could not have said which, passed from it as swiftly as a change would sweep over a hillside on a wild, bright day. And he lifted his foot to put back one of the little flaming logs, which was tumbling forward. He wore the white riding coat and top boots, then in vogue in style, and in the light of the fire touching their light surfaces made him look very pale, with his long brown hair, all untrimmed, hanging loose about him. His indifference to fire was sufficiently remarkable to elicit a word of remonstrance from Mr. Lorry. His boot, oh, this was a long chapter. We're 20 minutes in. His boot was still upon the hot embers of the flaming log when it had broken under the weight of his foot. I forgot it, he said. Mr. Lorry's eyes were again attracted to his face, taking note of the wasted air which clouded the naturally handsome features, and having the expression of prisoners' faces fresh in his mind, he was strongly reminded of that expression. And your duties here have drawn to an end, sir? Said Carton, turning to him. Yes, as I was telling you last night when Lucy came in so unexpectedly, I have at length done all that I can do here. I hoped to have left them in perfect safety and then to have quitted Paris. I have my leave to pass. I was ready to go. So Mr. Lorry got the papers he needs to go back to London. He thought everything was okay. He thought Darnay was going to be out, and now he doesn't know what to do. They were both silent. Yours is a long life to look back upon, sir, said Carton wistfully. I'm 78. I'm in my 78th year, so we now know the age of Mr. Lorry. You have been useful all your life, steadily and constantly occupied, trusted, respected, and looked up to. I have been a man of business ever since I have been a man. Indeed, I may say that I was a man of business when I was a boy. See what a place you fill at 78. How many people will miss you when you have to leave it? A solitary old bachelor, answered Mr. Lorry, shaking his head. There is nobody to weep for me. How can you say that? Wouldn't she weep for you? Wouldn't her child? Yes, thank God. I didn't quite mean what I said. It is a thing to thank God for, is it not? Now, I know the ending, and this scene is I'm getting all choked up from this scene. Surely, if you could say with truth to your own solitary heart tonight, I have secured to myself the love and attachment, the gratitude or respect of no human creature. I have won myself a tender place in no regard. I have done nothing good or serviceable to be remembered by. Your 78 years would be 78 heavy curses, would they not? You say truly, Mr. Carton. I think they would be. Sidney turned his eyes again from the pot upon the fire, and after a silence of a few moments said, I should like to ask you, does your childhood seem afar off? Do the days when you sat at your mother's knee seem days of very long ago? Responding to this softened manner, Mr. Lorry answered, 20 years back, yes. At this time of my life, no. For as I draw closer and closer to the end, I travel in the circle nearer and nearer to the beginning. It seems to me to be one of the kind smoothings and preparings of the way. My heart is touched now by many remembrances that had long fallen asleep, of my pretty young mother, and I so old, and by many associations of the days when what we call the world was not so real with me, and my faults were not confined in me. Veronica from London. I'm embarrassed because I'm reading A Tale of Two Cities, and my English is very American English. It should be read by probably you. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you popped in. I have someone I follow, and she doesn't do book readings, but she does book reviews, and she's amazing. That's not you, is it? Because I don't remember what her online name is. I just see her on my Instagram and stuff. No, I watch her on YouTube, I think. I understand the feeling, exclaimed Carton with a bright flush. And are you better for it? I hope so. Carton terminated the conversation here by rising to him to help him on with his outer coat. But you, said Mr. Lorry, reverting to the theme, you are young. Yes, said Carton, I'm not old, but my young way was never the way to age. Enough of me. So the question was, if you knew that you'd live this long and no one loved you, no one would cry for when you left this world, you didn't make an impact, you didn't make a difference, would you feel your life wasted, is basically what he's asking. He says, do you miss your mom? Do you miss your childhood? And Lori's like, I've come full circle. I missed her a lot when I was middle-aged, but now I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever the end has for me. And Lori tells Sidney Carton, but you're still young. And Sidney Carton, you can see he's never had any self-esteem. He's never given himself the chance. And that's something I don't like about the romantic period. Like, you are what you're destined to be. where Sidney Carton probably could have been a different person if he'd made that decision to be a different person. I think so many teenagers struggle with this. Like they get the bad, thank you, Veronica. They get the bad name for themselves early on. You know, you're a middle schooler, you do something stupid, you get in a fight, or, you know, girl, you do Snapchat things with the boys that, you know, is the thing that's going on in middle school. And then you get to high school and that reputation has followed you. And so you think that's who I have to be the rest of my life. But then when you get to college, or if you go to a different school, you can start fresh, you can start new. You're not destined to this all your life. Well, there's that sense that Sidney Carton says, I'm a bad egg. I'm bad to the bone. I'm dark-hearted. I'm a drunk. I'm useless. I can't be good for anyone. And when he truly felt love, I can't change, not even for this love. And he just gave up. So he feels like my life has had no meaning. So he's kind of depressed, a very gothic character, right? And for me, I'm sure, said Mr. Lorry, are you they said enough about me. Are you going out? I'll walk with you to her gate. You know my vagabond and restless habits. If I should prowl about the streets a long time, don't be uneasy. I shall reappear in the morning. You go to the court tomorrow? Yes, unhappily. I shall be there, but only as one of the crowd. My spy will find a place for me. Take my arm, sir. Mr. Lorry did so, and they went downstairs and out in the streets. A few minutes brought them to Mr. Lorry's destination. Carton left him there, but lingered at a little distance and turned back to the gate again when it was shut and touched it. He had heard of her going to the prison every day. She came out here, he said, looking about him. Turned this way. Must have trod on those stones often. Let me follow in her steps. He just has this distant love, unrequited love for Lucy. It was 10 o'clock at night when he stood before the prison of La Force, where she had stood hundreds of times. A little wood sawyer, having closed his shop, was smoking his pipe at his shop door. Good night, citizen, said Sidney Carton, pausing in going by, for the man eyed him inquisitively. Good night, citizen. How goes the Republic? You mean the guillotine? Not ill. 63 today. We shall mount to 100 soon. Samson and his men complain sometimes of being exhausted. He's so droll, that Samson. Such a barber. Do you often go to see him shave? Always, every day. What a barber. You have seen him at work? Never. Go and see him when he has a good batch. Figure this to yourself, citizen. He shaved the 63 today in less than 2 pipes. Less than 2 pipes, like smoking pipe. Word of honor. As the grinning little man held out the pipe he was smoking to explain how he timed the executioner, Carton was so sensible of rising desire to strike out the life of him that he turned away. But you are not English, said the wood sawyer, though you wear English dress. Yes, said Carton, pausing again and answering over his shoulder. You speak like a Frenchman. I'm an old student here. Aha, a perfect Frenchman. Good night, Englishman. Good night, citizen. But go and see that droll dog, the little man persisted, calling after him, and take a pipe with you. Sidney had not gone far out of sight when he stopped in the middle of the street under a glimmering lamp and wrote with his pencil on a scrap of paper. Then, traversing with the decided step of one who remembered the way well, several dark and dirty streets, much dirtier than usual, for the best public thoroughfares remained uncleansed in those times of terror, he stopped at a chemist's shop, which the owner was closing with his own hands, a small, dim, crooked shop kept in a tortuous uphill thoroughfare by a small, dim, crooked man. Giving this citizen good night as he confronted him at his counter, he laid the scrap of paper before him. Phew! The chemist whistled softly. He read it. Sidney Carton took no heed, and the chemist said, For you, citizen? For me. You will be careful to keep them separate, citizen. You know the consequences of mixing them. So he's at the pharmacy, and he's getting some kind of drugs that the pharmacist is like, it's for you. Be careful with these drugs. There's something dangerous about these drugs. Perfectly. I know the consequences. Certain small packets were made and given to him. They put them one by one in the breast of his inner coat, counted out the money for them, and deliberately left the shop. There is nothing more to do, he said, glancing upward at the moon. Until tomorrow. I can't sleep. It was not a reckless manner, the manner in which he said these words aloud under the fast-sailing clouds, nor was it more expressive of negligence than defiance. It was the settled manner of a tired man who had wandered and struggled and got lost, but who at length struck into his road and saw its end. Like, I know the story, and it's just getting good. I'm just letting you know. Dickens is just building the tension, laying, like, what is Sidney Carton up to? What's he up to? He's made a plan with a spy. He talks about what's the purpose of life. If nobody's loved you, if nobody cares about you, he's gone to a pharmacist and gotten some concoction medication that's dangerous. It has dangerous outcomes. What is he up to? Long ago, when he had been famous among his earliest competitors as a youth of great promise, he had followed his father to the grave. His mother had died years before. These solemn words, which had been read at his father's grave, arose in his mind as he went down the dark streets among the heavy shadows, with the moon and the clouds sailing on high above him. I am the resurrection. So this is a biblical allusion. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. So he's thinking about his father's death and his father's funeral and what the words were that were said. So he's thinking about death. In a city dominated by the axe, alone at night, with natural sorrow rising in him from the 63 who had been that day put to death, and for tomorrow's victims, then awaiting their doom in the prisons, and still of tomorrows and tomorrows, the chain of association that brought the words home, like a rusty old ship's anchor from the deep, might have been easily found. He did not seek it, but repeated them and went on. With a solemn interest in the lighted windows where the people were going to rest, forgetful through a few calm hours of the horrors surrounding them, in the towers of the churches where no prayers were said, for the popular revolution. I'm sorry, I am struggling reading. For the proper not revolution. And now I lost it completely. Revulsion had even traveled that length of self-destruction from years of priestly impostors, plunderers, and profligates. And what do we call that when you have the repeating first sound? So if you're doing literary analysis, you've got alliteration. I almost said hyperbole or some other thing that it wasn't. So alliteration. So what were the words? Plunderers, profligates, priestly impostors. In the distant burial places reserved as they rode upon the gates for eternal sleep, in the abounding jails, and in the streets along which the 60s rolled to a death which had become so common and material that no sorrowful story of a haunting spirit ever rose among the people out of all the working of the guillotine. With a solemn interest in the whole life and death of the city settling down to its short nightly pause and fury, Sidney Carton crossed the Seine, the river that runs through Paris, again for the lighted streets. Few coaches were abroad, for riders and coaches were liable to be suspected, and gentility hid its head in red nightcaps and put on heavy shoes and trudged. Like you could lose your head for being a nobleman. So everybody just dressed like the citizens with their red caps. But the theaters were all well filled, and the people poured cheerfully out as he passed and went chatting home. At one of the theater doors, there was a little girl with a mother looking for a way across the street through the mud. He carried the child over, and before the timid arm was loosed from his neck, asked her for a kiss. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. So we've got this repetition. And what's the importance of repetition? It's telling us that Dickens is telling us something. Like, pay attention. Now the streets were quiet and the night wore on. The words were in the echoes of his feet and were in the air, perfectly calm and steady. He sometimes repeated them to himself as he walked, but he heard them always. The night wore out, and as he stood upon the bridge, listening to the water as it splashed the river walls of the island of Paris, where the picturesque confusion of houses and cathedrals shone bright in the light of the moon, the day came coldly. So he's wandered the streets all night. Now he's seeing the sunrise. looking like a dead face out of the sky. So notice the imagery of death over and over again. And yet that sweet little kiss from the little girl, just he does this act of kindness. He carries the girl so she doesn't have to be in the mud. And he wants in exchange just a little tenderness. He has not felt love. Remember, his mother died as a young boy, and he's just been this ruffian, this misbehaved kid. And yet he just wants that little bit of innocent sweetness, that little bit of affection and love. Then the night with the moon and the stars turned pale and died. For a little while, it seemed as if creation were delivered over to death's dominion, that dark part of the night where you see no moon. But the glorious sun rising seemed to strike those words, that burden of the night, straight and warm to his heart in its long bright rays, and looking along them with reverently shaded eyes, a bridge of light appeared to span the air between him and the sun, while the river sparkled under it. The strong tide, so swift, so deep and certain, was like a congenial friend in the morning stillness. He walked by the stream, far from the houses, and in the light and warmth of the sun fell asleep on the bank. When he awoke and was afoot again, he lingered there yet a little longer, watching an eddy that turned and turned purposeless until the stream absorbed it and carried it on to the sea. Like me, just purposeless. I'm just caught up in the motion. I just have had no purpose. That's me. I'm just taken along by life. I think this part of the story, if you couldn't connect to anything else, if you're a teenager reading this with me, I think most teenagers, as a teacher of teenagers for 30 years, I think most teenagers feel that way at some point. What's the point? Just full of despair and self-loathing and, I just can't do anything right. And there's just no reason for anything. And this is where he is. A trading boat with the sail of the softened color of a dead leaf then glided into his view, floated by him, and died away. Notice this death imagery. As its silent track in the water disappeared, the prayer that had broken up out of his heart for a merciful consideration of all his poor blindness and errors ended in the words, I am the resurrection and the life. And we've got the sunrise coming up with this imagery. Mr. Lorry was already out when he got back, and it was easy to surmise, to figure out where the good old man was gone. Sidney Carton drank nothing but a little coffee, ate some bread, and having washed and changed to refresh himself, went out to the place of trial. The court was all astir and abuzz when the black sheep, whom many fell away from in dread, pressed him into an obscure corner among the crowd. Mr. Lorry was there, and Dr. Manette was there. She was there, sitting beside her father. When her husband was brought in, she turned to look upon him so sustaining, so encouraging, so full of admiring love and pitying tenderness, yet so courageous for his sake that it called the healthy blood into his face, brightened his glance, and animated his heart. If there had been any eyes to notice the influence of her look on Sidney Carton, it would have been seen to be the same influence exactly. He just loves her, and he wants somebody to love him the way she loves Charles Darnay. Every eye was turned to the jury, the same determined patriots and good Republicans as yesterday and the day before and tomorrow and the day after. Eager and prominent among them, one man with a craving face and his fingers perpetually hovering about his lips, whose appearance, I tend to have my hand on my face a lot too. So that's what he's saying, just constantly. What do you think that shows? Like a nervous type, right? A fell, uncompromising, murderous business meeting there. Every eye then sought some other eye in the crowd and gleamed at it approvingly, and heads nodded at one another before bending forward with a stained attention. Charles Evrémonde, called Darnay, released yesterday, re-accused and retaken yesterday. Indictment delivered him last night, suspected and denounced enemy of the Republic, aristocrat, one of a family of tyrants, one of a race proscribed, that they had used their abolished privileges to the infamous oppression of the people. Charles Evrémonde, called Darnay, in right of such proscription, absolutely dead in law. To this effect, in as few or fewer words, the public prosecutor, The president asked, was the accused openly denounced or secretly? Openly, President. By whom? 3 voices. Ernest Defarge, wine vendor of Saint-Antoine. Good. Therese Defarge, his wife. Good. Alexander Manette, physician. A great uproar took place in the court. So they're saying the 3 people that accused him and were witnesses against Charles Darnay were the 2 Defarges, which we expected. But Dr. Manette? What? What has happened here? Has Dr. Manette, in like his craziness, made a statement that wasn't true? That's not what it is, but I'm just trying to help you to think, like to guess. President, I indignantly protest to you that this is a forgery and a fraud. You know the accused to be the husband of my daughter. My daughter and those dear to her are far dearer to me than my life. Who and where is the false conspirator who says that I denounce the husband of my child? Citizen Manette, be tranquil, be calm, tranquil. I guess in English we have tranquil, but we don't ever say it. To fail in submission to the authority of the tribunal would be to put yourself out of law. As to what is dearer to you than life, nothing could be so dear to a good citizen as the Republic. We don't care if you think, if you're going to tell me she's more important than anything, then you're going to get in trouble because the Republic is the number one thing. Loud acclamations hailed this rebuke. The president rang his bell and with warmth resumed. If the Republic should demand of you the sacrifice of your child herself, you would have no duty but to sacrifice her. Listen to what is to follow. In the meantime, be silent. Frantic acclamations were again raised. Dr. Manette sat down with his eyes looking round and his lips trembling. His daughter drew closer to him. The craving man on the jury rubbed his hands together and restored the usual hand to his mouth. Defarge was produced. When the court was quiet enough to admit of his being heard and rapidly expounded the story of the imprisonment and of his having been a mere boy in the doctor's service and of the release and of the state of the prisoner when released and delivered to him, this short examination followed, for the court was quick with its work. You did good service at the taking of the Bastille, citizen. I believe so. Here, an excited woman screeched from the crowd, "You are one of the best patriots there. Why not say so? You were a cannoneer that day there, and you were among the first to enter the accursed fortress when it fell. Patriots, I speak the truth." It was the Vengeance who, amidst the warm commendations of the audience, thus assisted the proceedings. The president rang his bell, but the Vengeance, warming with encouragement, shrieked, "I defy that bell," wherein she was likewise much commended. "Inform the tribunal of what you did that day within the Bastille, citizen." "I knew," said Defarge, looking down at his wife, who stood at the bottom of the steps on which he was raised, looking steadily up at him. "I knew that this prisoner, of whom I speak, had been confined in a cell known as 105 North Tower. I knew it from himself. He knew himself by no other name than 105 North Tower when he made shoes under my care. As I served my gun that day, I resolve, when the place shall fall, to examine that cell. It falls. I mount to the cell with a fellow citizen who is one of the jury, directed by a jailer. I examine it very closely. In a hole in the chimney, where a stone has been worked out and replaced, I find a written paper. This is that written paper. I have made it my business to examine some specimens of the writing of Dr. Manette. This is the writing of Dr. Manette. I confide this paper in the writing of Dr. Manette to the hands of the president. Let it be read." In a dead silence and stillness, the prisoner under trial looked lovingly at his wife only looking from him to look with solicitude at her father, Dr. Manette keeping his eyes fixed on the reader, Madame Defarge never taking hers from the prisoner. She hates the prisoner. She hates Darnay. Defarge never taking his from his feasting wife, and all the other eyes there intent upon the doctor, who saw none of them. The paper was read as follows. So, just in case you didn't quite get it, Defarge is brought forward. They said, what is this testimony you're saying that it was Dr. Manette? He said, "I knew because I had been the young boy servant of Manette years ago. And so when he was released from prison, he was brought to me." Thank you, Kelly. He was brought to me in Saint Antoine. I was the wine cellar. He had the pub. And he said, he kept telling me his cell number, 105 North Tower. So when they had the storming of the Bastille, and even though we read it, we didn't see it in the read at that time. He opened the cell. He found this loose rock that had been carved with the initials. He pulled that out, and in it was this paper, this letter that's going to be read. And so they describe that Darnay is staring intently at Lucy, who's staring intently back at him. Let me get them all right. And Manette is looking at the person who's reading, and Madame Defarge is looking at Darnay, and Monsieur Defarge is looking at Madame Defarge, because it's telling us what all the relationships and the priorities of the relationships are, and the people are all watching Dr. Manette. So we know that, I know the whole answer, but we know that by that statement, the priority of Madame Defarge is her vengeance against Darnay. The priority of Monsieur Defarge is whatever Madame Defarge wants. The priority of Darnay and Lucy is their love for one another. The priority of Dr. Manette is he wants the truth. I want to hear how I've been brought into this. And then all the people are fascinated with what's going on with Dr. Manette. So next time, we will read chapter 10, and there's 5 more chapters after that. So we are getting there, and it's getting good. Yeah? What do you think's going to happen? It is a tragedy. Get your Kleenex, because I don't know that I'll make it through much more without crying. I appreciate you guys. We're about to break 13,000. So who wants to be my 13,000th subscriber? Let me know. Kind of time it, kind of check in, get your friends to subscribe so that you can get more in there. I think there's 8 or 9 more to go. And then don't unsubscribe, because it just it'll go down, and then you have to, it washes out. So don't unsubscribe and resubscribe. But I want to keep growing. I want to keep reading. I want you to ring the bell so you know when I go live. If you join Discord, and I put the link out a lot of times, if you can find one of the links in our previous readings, come join Discord, or if you put a comment in, I'll add it later. Because I almost always say I'm going live in so many minutes, or, I won't go live today, or different things like that, to let y'all know what I'm doing there. If school has started for you, I hope it's calm. I hope you learn. I hope you fall in love. That's kind of young, especially if you're in 8th grade. Don't fall in love. But be happy. Be young and happy. And, it is a choice. I know it's a scary time, but you guys are brave, and you can do this. And that's what this story is all about, is being brave. Wait till you see the ending. It is masterful. It took us a lot of reading to get through it, but I promise, I think the ending it's very romantic. And they all live happily ever after romantic, but it's this beautiful sense of nobility and human spirit kind of thing. So just pay attention to what Dickens is telling us, all that death imagery and all that, these twists, these unexpected twists that Dickens always throws at us. It's always fun. So that is 47 minutes, and I didn't do a lot of chit-chatting. So those of you that criticize me for the chit-chatting, I need the reward when you're like, good job, Rachel, you didn't chit-chat so much that time. It's because I want to get the book read. All right. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for supporting me and encouraging me. Thank you for the comments that you make. No thank you to the people that run the porn service, that put the porn comment on every single time, and you're trying to be crafty by going wonderful. I don't fall for it. It's still a porn site. These are teenagers. Go to a site that's got, I don't care what adults do, but leave my teenagers alone. Y'all are not going to listen, because if you don't listen to this, you just are some bot that knows this is done and it's posted. Yeah. Ariana, thank you. Muniba, thank you. Thumbs up to you. But yeah, just keep posting and keep writing to me on Instagram or here, because I love to hear from you. It encourages me. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I see a comment, and then I find out the next morning I've tried to type in the night, and Lord knows what I've put on the comment. So, but I really, if you've ever written to me and I haven't responded, I really, really try to respond to every comment that I ever get. If you don't get a response from me, it means I didn't see it, or I I don't know what, that's the only thing that means to me is I didn't see it. If I don't like a comment, now if it's like inappropriate, like totally insult, no, I don't care if you insult me, but if it's totally something, thank you, Veronica. I love London, by the way. My son lived there for a while and he always dreamed of going back to live again. But if it's something really hateful about other people, about a group of people, some ugly political comment, I will take that down. But if you want to insult me, you know, you don't have anything better to do and you have all that anger in you and you don't know what to do with that anger and you've tried meditation and it didn't work and you just need to say something ugly to me. Okay, I accept it, you know, but don't say ugly things about other people. So I guess I just needed to chit chat. It was a day. This week has been stressful at work, but I'm doing my guided meditation and I'm doing my art therapy and I'm just hoping that tomorrow's a better day because that's all we can do. And speaking of tomorrow, it's a Saturday, so hopefully I'll have time to read and I will read to you next time. See ya.